Hello, welcome to the JimRPG show. It's July the 3rd, 2020, and this is your weekly roundup of news from the gaming industry. We're going to be talking about The Last of Us Part 2. There's so much controversy surrounding that game, and we're going to be diving right into it. We're also going to be talking about Ubisoft's latest game called Hyperscape, and we're going to debate, are AAA games too long? But first, we're going to be talking about The Last of Us Part 2. Now, Patricia Hernandez has written an article on Polygon, and she's gone over a whole ton of issues surrounding The Last of Us Part 2, but essentially The Last of Us Part 2 has turned into what I would say a political minefield that I don't think anybody really expected. So with all the articles, I'll leave a link in the description below, but we're going to take some excerpts from all of these articles, and I'll just read some of that now. And this is from Neil Druckmann with this quote: "A few hours later, the leak is everywhere, and you're starting to get hate on every social media you're on, and soon that turns into death threats, anti-Semitic remarks, and just craziness I never could have anticipated," he continued, stating that he never thought the game would get this sort of hate. It's still visible on social media, where top replies to nearly anything from Naughty Dog will include responses like, "The game is straight garbage." It seems unlikely that these opinions are coming from people who have actually played the game, given that it's impossible to explain how The Last of Us Part 2 could have racked up hundreds of negative user reviews on Metacritic immediately after launch. So right after launch, we had a critic score of about 96 for The Last of Us Part 2. So a lot of the critics, they overwhelmingly liked the game. However, the user reviews, there were a ton of user reviews. I think it was almost like about 8,000 user reviews that rated the game around an average of 3.4. So basically a ton of people just voted the game as 0. And that there was no way the game could have possibly had 8,000 reviews the moment the game launched, because it's a 20 to 35 hour game, and Sony didn't provide that many number of copies for users to go and play the game and review the game, not when the game immediately launched anyway. So a lot of it was people already had decided whether the things that were in The Last of Us Part 2 they agreed with or not, and it didn't matter about the quality of the game anymore. They kind of used the game as a political tool to, I guess, espouse their views. And I think if it gets to this type of level, it doesn't make sense anymore. We've seen that with Steam reviews. People just hate on the game, but sometimes that has to do with the quality of the game itself. But it seems with The Last of Us Part 2 anyway, a lot of it has just become political. Most of it is because there are trans characters, and the main character Ellie is a lesbian in this game. So a lot of people have taken sides on this debate. Like, I don't want politics in my games, which is just incredible in 2020 actually. So let's continue. So the article writes, discussion about the survival game also hampered by unusually restrictive embargo guidelines, which included sentences like, do not include any beat-by-beat descriptions of pivotal narrative or cutscenes moments, and do not reveal the fate of any character or the inciting events. This prevented websites from discussing any specifics of the game's story, which was tricky considering that the game reveals something surprising within its first 2 hours that impacts the remainder of its 20 to 30 hour journey. Yeah, so there is also some pushback that the game was too tightly controlled, and there was a lot of, I guess people that wanted to read more from the reviews, or people that were writing the reviews felt a little bit restricted, and that also created people to just talk about things outside of the amount of stuff that they could talk about. People didn't want to be restricted. They wanted to be free to talk about what they want in the game, especially when, as it says here, that something happened within the first 2 hours, and they couldn't really talk about that because they would spoil a lot of the other parts of the story. And if you're playing this game, I won't be spoiling anything, and this article doesn't spoil anything, so you are safe to discuss to watch this video. So the writer continues, Patricia continues, why go through such lengths, especially when the internet was flooded with half-informed takes and speculation based on what had already leaked? Control. The studio had already gone to great efforts to maintain a tight grip on what folks knew about the experience. As Kotaku reported, Naughty Dog at one point showed a fake scene during a trailer to make people believe that a character would be more present in the game than they actually were. So this could be because somebody died, I'm not sure, but I don't think we can really insinuate that they were trying to fake the fact that this character could have been in the game more because he was in a scene in the trailer. So I don't think we can insinuate that. So I don't quite agree with that. But I do agree with the part where it says maybe there was perhaps a little bit too much control over what people could write. I think there is an issue with games itself if you're going to put a spoiler in the first couple of hours, because that's going to affect how people talk about the game, and we see this in forums a lot where people have spoiler tags on basically almost everything that they're writing. So it becomes like an entire forum with just spoiler tag stuff that is uninteresting to read. So I think that in itself, Naughty Dog maybe should think about how they go and present the narrative. Even though I know they want full narrative control and creative freedom over their game, they probably should know that if they put a spoiler at the start of the game, nobody can really talk about it, and that's going to be a problem for the game itself. Now, Patricia goes on to write, on June 12th, Vice published a review of The Last of Us Part 2, in which critic Rob Zacny said that while the game had memorable moments that made for great spectacle, he was less taken with the story and characters. According to Zacny, Vice's review prompted a Sony representative to reach out on behalf of Naughty Dog. They felt some of the conclusions I reached in my review were unfair and dismissed some meaningful changes or improvements, Zacny told Polygon over Twitter messages. I was happy to unpack a bit of my reasoning, however, and received a perfectly cordial message in response, Zacny said. So, you know, this one actually really surprised me, that Sony would actually contact the reviewer over this review, especially when at the time, I actually told the reviewer Rob on Twitter that he wrote a great review and it was well written, and he responded back with thank you. So I mean, I wrote this and said, and so this is his review right here, and I'll just read a little bit of it out. There is a common saying that if you seek revenge, you should dig 2 graves. Playing The Last of Us Part 2 is like being made to dig those graves with your teeth. It is over 24 hours of spiraling cycles of violence and vengeance, being reminded roughly every hour that the whole endeavor is squalid and cruel. There is hardly a moment of joy it will not eventually curdle. A truly shocking number of characters that you will come to care about will be gruesomely mutilated or slaughtered or both. All of it is utterly predictable, or if you're feeling charitable, tragically fated. So when I read this review, and you can go read the rest of it yourself, I just felt like this was an extremely well written review, and a lot of what he's saying isn't a negative, wasn't anything negative against the game. He didn't actually hate the game. He just felt like it probably wasn't for him. for him, it was really tough to play a game where he says the whole endeavor is squalid and cruel. He just didn't want to play a cruel game where you're killing people with really brutal weapons. And that's the kind of take that I felt like when I watched the trailer, that the violence was over the line, and that's clearly Naughty Dog's intention, right? To cross the line, to make you feel disturbed about the violence. And for Rob, it was just a little bit too much for Rob, I think, given reading his review. And I thought that was a perfectly fine take. So I feel like when they say Sony contacted Rob about the review, I hope it was more because of, hey, did you hate the review? Did you hate the game? Or did you just find that it wasn't for him? And hopefully, you know, Sony understands that it probably wasn't for him. Now, I don't want to think that Sony want to control all of the reviews. And that was the point that I touched earlier on in my previous video. I've done a video on this, the issues with game reviews, and you can check that on my channel. And I posted that last week. When there's so much control over reviews, Sony is trying to frame the game in a sense that will drive more sales. And that's not what criticism is about. Criticism is about discussing the game and analyzing the game for what it makes you feel. And that's what Rob was doing. He wasn't bashing the game. He just felt like it was too hard for him because he wasn't in that space. Now, Polygon continued to write that co-director Neil Druckmann has been hopping into discussion about the game to wag his finger at journalists who are making fun of a tasteless post that had compared The Last of Us Part 2 to Schindler's List. Other developers like God of War's Cory Barlog closed ranks around Druckmann, going so far as to unfairly position dissenting opinion as an attempt to tear developers down. Wow, so there's a lot to unpack here, and if I could just go back to Jeff Kanata's tweet. Now, Jeff wrote, in a medium where everything is John Wick, The Last of Us Part 2 is Schindler's List, and just like that film, there were times when I wasn't sure I could keep going. It is a relentless emotional assault that I suspect will force even the most jaded gamer to feel empathy. Now, that's kind of pretty much what Rob Zacny was saying in his Vice review, so I don't understand why they would just single out Rob. It seems like were they concerned that it was a negative review? I hope not, because if there's too much control over what people say on reviews, then Sony isn't really doing their job. If they want critics to critically discuss their game, they can't have it both ways. Critics is not PR. That's not what independent journalists are supposed to do. PR is PR, and if you're going to give review copies out to independent journalists, they have to be independent and say whatever they want to say. So that's what Neil Druckmann. Now Neil backed up what Jeff was saying, and honestly, that was perfectly fine for me because Jeff is perfectly it's perfectly acceptable for Jeff to say what he needed to say. I don't think he was comparing it to the Holocaust like a lot of other people were saying. He was just comparing the impact how hard it hit him playing the game, and he thought about a film that hit him as hard as it could. And yeah, Saving Private Ryan, Schindler's List, any hard-hitting movie I guess you could think of. He just wanted to make that comparison where John Wick is an action film, but Schindler's List moved him a lot more. And that's all he wanted to say, I think. I don't think it was a Holocaust a comparison. He's not that type of person. Uh, Now, the other part to this, it says other developers like God of War's Cory Barlog closed ranks around Druckmann, going so far as to unfairly position dissenting opinion as an attempt to tear developers down. And now we also saw Cory Barlog criticize Jason Schreier after this and say that Jason was being a bully. Now, I honestly think he didn't have to say that at all. This was really just between Jeff and Jason. But it seems like people wanted to protect the game so badly, and people wanted to protect their company so badly. Essentially, they were looking after their baby. And that's what seemed like Cory Barlog was doing, and Neil Druckmann. So I don't have people defending the tweet. I just have people coming in and dirt piling on others, and that's a problem. Like on Twitter, especially with people with a lot of significant followers, there are better ways to do it. You don't have to dogpile and shame other people online. You can just quietly disagree with their opinion. I mean, how hard is it to be nice to people online? But maybe there's something there that we didn't see. Maybe Cory and Neil were they felt like Jason had been really harsh on their company in the past, so maybe they felt like they had to hit back at the journalists, which, you know, I just think leave the journalists to do their work, and you go off and do your work. To have a public spat is just not good for the industry as a whole, I think. Now, finally, Jason Schreier also tweeted out an innocuous and fairly broad hot take about the length of AAA games, a subject that is often a topic of debate. So Jason just said video games are too long, and it probably is clear that he's talking about The Last of Us Part 2. And this was just a few days ago. And in response, Troy Baker, who is the voice actor behind Joel in The Last of Us games, he quoted Schreier's tweet alongside a bizarre quote from Theodore Roosevelt about the value of a critic versus that of a creator. "It is not the critic who counts," the quote starts. "The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat." So it essentially is not even really about the tweet anymore, that video games are too long. It's about the person who actually did the work, which, way to go to pat yourself on the back. I didn't realize that people were that vain. But there we go. So I don't know what Troy Baker was thinking when he posted this, but that's not the post of a humble man. So honestly, like Troy Baker, Cory Barlog, I don't think they really needed to jump in to this debate, because this is only going to, I guess, add fuel to the fire. And the Last of Us Part 2 has plenty of fuel in the fire already. And before I finish on this topic, honestly, The Last of Us Part 2, it kind of goes to show that there can be a little bit too much bad exposure for your game. People have already taken sides in this game. And I think what we saw happen was that we had the people who criticized Sony and Naughty Dog about their workplace culture. But now, on top of that, we have people who against trans and human rights, LGBT rights, and because all of this, how does YouTube even figure out like the algorithm behind all of this? All of this is just a whole mass of negative response that is within YouTube's algorithm, but everybody just sees it as negative feedback. A lot of videos are getting views, a lot of negative videos are getting views, and this kind of has snowballed into something that is way bigger. Because don't tell me that the workplace culture people who are against Naughty Dog are on the same side as the people who are on the LGBT rights, people who are criticizing the game. Those two groups are not the same people who hate the game, except both of those forces have combined to attack the game, and now this is what we've got. We've got people hating on the game, and there are just a ton of negative videos and comments on the game now because of this. And honestly, I don't think the game really deserves the amount of negative feedback that it's gotten. It doesn't make any sense. There's just way more than what I would have expected. Sure, you know, you always get people who are negative towards the game, but with a Metacritic score of 96, you don't expect the amount of negative exposure that we've gotten. And you know, just browsing through my YouTube channel, or I would say almost 80% of the videos are negative in some way, and that's got nothing to do with videos that I've been watching. I've only watched one, The Last of Us 2 video. Honestly, it just feels like a lot of people are dogpiling on this game right now, and I don't think it really deserves that at all. So Ubisoft announced a new game today called Hyperscape. Now we're going to play a couple of these trailers, and I'll play the first one now, and then we'll talk about it, and then we'll play the second and talk about that trailer. So here we go. Right, so that was the official trailer, and there is also a gameplay trailer that we'll get into. But first, so basically this is a battle royale game, obviously with a futuristic type of aesthetic, and quite clearly from what it looks like to begin with, it looks like a Quake and Overwatch and battle royale and lawbreakers type of game. Seems like it takes the best bits from a lot of different games, and I think this is pretty much a direct competitor to people who played Apex Legends. I think that it's trying to take the Fortnite audience the people who have been playing Fortnite for ages probably want a new game, and the people that are playing, there are people like Ninja who maybe people want a brand new game where they can be a really big streamer as well. So people who are kind of like on the fringe of Fortnite want a new game where they can be the top player. So I think with Hyperscape, uh, I think the timing is right, honestly, and I think timing is really important because I think Apex Legends came out right at that kind of time where uh, Fortnite was at its peak, and trying to take people away from another game where it's peak, where people are still having tons of fun, is probably not going to pick up a lot of people. So now that people played Fortnite for a couple of years and know everything about the game, it's probably about the right time for people to start thinking about or getting into a brand new game. And the same with Apex Legends. I think this is kind of saying like, hey, you gave Apex Legends a go, and if you didn't like it, why not try this game? So Resetera has got some information on Hyperscape, so I'll just read that. So it's been worked on for 2 years, very streamlined battle royale experience. Engine took best bits from Rainbow Six and Assassin's Creed, and now the developer is actually Rainbow Six Siege office or studio. The map is 1 kilometer squared, and there's 100 players per map. I believe it's 99 because there's 33 teams of 3 players each. Finding duplicate weapons allows you to upgrade it to 5 times. No circles, and the maps decay, and they'll show that in the next video, the gameplay video, very clearly. Crown drops at the end, and you must either capture and hold it for 45 seconds or kill everyone. Twitch extension evolves with the community, shows streamer stats and loadouts in real time, and lets the community choose server events. So that's something really cool. So the community who are watching the game, they can decide on some gameplay events during the game, I believe. Future holds new game modes, new BP, new seasons, 3 squads, and solo are main modes. So the thing that I took out from that trailer the most was that there was a ton of verticality in the game, and so that's going to bring a different type of I guess gameplay action because Fortnite and I believe Apex Legends also was very ground based, and even PUBG really. PUBG is totally ground based. So but you know, that didn't go over so well for Lawbreakers, so we're gonna have to see. I just believe that Lawbreakers didn't get the marketing or push behind Lawbreakers to really succeed, and it came right at the time where Fortnite was 2 or 3 months out and Lawbreakers came out, and it was just dead because everybody just wanted to play Fortnite. So you know, now is kind of the right time for something like Hyperscape. So we're gonna play the other gameplay trailer, and it's 4 minutes long, but let's play that and then discuss the game.
Hello, contender. Welcome to the Hyperscape, our new fast-paced battle royale that brings verticality to the next level. In Hyperscape, up to 100 players will compete in a variety of game modes. Squad and solo crown rush are the main modes where battle royale champions are crowned. Neo Arcadia is a virtual, shimmering city designed to encourage vertical mobility and fast-paced combat situations. From sky-high towers to deadly interiors, you will constantly need to adapt your fighting styles. Once the battle begins, your personalized deployment pod is your transport to the battle. You will be able to drop in any part of the map, so pick your drop spot wisely. Hit the ground running, because you'll start with only a melee weapon. Hotly contested landmarks are known to contain abundant caches of gear, but high risk brings the chance of high reward. Gear is found inside buildings, closed off by breakable barricades, and inside supply crates located around the map. As you traverse the city, looking for gear and enemies, you'll discover the different environments create diverse gameplay opportunities and challenges. Your competition may come from any angle. Every battle in Hyperscape is a fresh experience where you leverage the varied arsenal you will find in Neo Arcadia. Your loadout is not determined by the character you choose, but by the weapons and hacks you loot. From full auto assault weapons to powerful energy blasters, there is a tool for any playstyle. Hacks are game-changing abilities you loot around the map that grant skills for offense, defense, and movement. You can loot 2 weapons and 2 hacks and swap them at any time if you need to change your strategy. The choice is in your hands. If you find a copy of a weapon or hack you already have in your possession, you can fuse it, creating an upgraded version. Each item can be upgraded several levels, improving magazine size, damage, or cooldown duration. As you discover your footing in the Hyperscape, your squad will be there to help you. Use the ping system to sync with your squad and warn them of potential threats or alert them to potential resources. If an enemy manages to take you out, the battle is not over. At 0 health, you'll become an echo and you can help your squad by scouting ahead. When enemies are eliminated, a restore point appears in that spot. Find a restore point and your squad mates can bring you back into the fight. As your game master, one of my favorite tasks is to keep things lively by triggering battle events, such as the infinite ammo event or the low gravity event. Viewers on Twitch help influence my choice and can vote on additional events, so remember to play the crowd. Keep an eye on your map contender. As the match progresses, sectors will decay and collapse throughout Neo Arcadia. If you're too late reaching a safe area, you will take damage over time and may be exposed to enemy attacks. Those skilled enough will enter the showdown phase. The Hyperscape crown will spawn in the final remaining sector. From here, you have 2 different paths to victory. Become the sole survivors or hold onto the crown for 45 seconds. You are now prepared for the Hyperscape, contender. We here at Prisma Dimensions hope you enjoy your stay.
So, after I watched those 2 trailers, I thought the game looked really awesome. I think, yeah, I was very, very excited for it. I'm not really a first-person shooter type fan, although I did get into Overwatch because that looked pretty good. But I think I'm excited because it's time for a change from Fortnite, and I think even though it's Ubisoft and we know it's going to be quite cookie cutter, you know, the kind of very boring level progression, I still think that the time is there for a bit of a change to our game discussion, and it's good to get some competition for Fortnite. But just going over the last gameplay trailer, so the things that I really noticed was that so the gear is actually inside the buildings, so you're gonna have to go into the buildings to get better weapons and power-ups, which means there'll be people defending those spots, and that kind of draws people to the same area. And I really love the fact that it's 3-on-3, or there are teams of 3, and I think that's just going to leave a lot of, I guess, what you call blind spots, especially soon as you start to take down one of the teammates, then you've kind of lost like one special skill, and the 2 others have to play extra hard to kind of make up for the person that they just lost. And definitely the game looked way faster than any of the other battle royales that have already been out on the market. I think that makes sense because people have been playing these type of games for a couple of years now, that they probably want something a bit faster feeling. Now, it seems like there's way more verticality than any other battle royale game out there. So I think that's going to provide a lot of interesting angles that we haven't seen before in the past, and that's going to be a lot of fun. Now, one thing is that the loadout for each character is around the map, so you don't actually choose the character and then you have those specific weapons with that character. What it actually is you got to go and find those weapons around the map to load out your character, and I think that's going to make for some really crazy gameplay where people have to think about where things are on the map and think about strategies on the fly. So if there are already areas that you can't actually get to, and there are only those type of power-ups in the area that you're in, you have to think about how you're going to actually beat your opponents with what is in the area itself. Players can only carry 2 weapons and 2 hacks, so that's kind of really cool. I think that's going to make people think about what type of weapons that they're going to carry a lot, and the 2 hacks are going to help for things like offense and defensive stats. So and also you can fuse the weapon if you have 2 of the same weapon. Now I feel like that might probably get abused because we know that everyone just min-maxes characters on online games. So if you can fuse your weapon to make a better weapon, there probably needs to be some sort of drawback to why you can't actually use that fused powerful weapon all the time. So it needs to be nerfed in some sort of way. We didn't really see that in the trailer, but I think Ubisoft, because this is Rainbow Six Siege developers, that they'll probably get the balance right, hopefully. You can also improve your weapons with upgrades, and dead teammates can scout ahead. I think that's really interesting. I think we've seen that in pretty much all the other games, where if you're dead you can just move the camera around, but we'll see how this plays out. I think that's a good use of people that are dead at the time and need and can still direct their teammates to go and do other things. Dead teammates create restore points, so they can be brought back into the game. But obviously if there's just 3 players, as soon as you're down 1 player, I think that's going to make it pretty tough for the other 2 players to get the other player back, especially when you take out one. You would probably want to take out the other 2 as quick as you can so that they can't respawn. Now this is really cool. This is kind of like the I guess reality TV type of thing that they've done in the past, where the audience can vote on live TV, and so in the game, audience can vote on gameplay events and gameplay changes. So it said in the trailer that they could have like unlimited ammo period of time, and there was another one, low gravity mode. So that could be really fun, because then the players have to adapt to challenges from the audience. And finally, I think that the really cool way to end the game is a showdown phase to, I guess, remove the camping that you might find. I think in PUBG, there is this sort of camping once you get down to like 2 or 3 players at the end, where people don't want to be the first one attacked, I guess. And so people go and grab the crown and play like a King of the Hill type thing for 45 seconds, and the player who can hold on to that crown is the winner. And so I think that's a really cool way of deciding the game. And overall, I think what they've tried to do in a very Ubisoft type fashion is that they looked around at the gaming landscape, picked all of the things that they thought were interesting and good to use, and put them into their game. It's not something brand new, but this is what Ubisoft are good at doing. I don't think this is going to be the perfect game, but this will definitely be a game that I think this will get plenty of people playing. So a huge story just broke on the fighting game community, and it was the EVO president, and there were some allegations that there was misconduct involving underage boys, and he's actually been relieved of his position effective immediately. But we'll go over the timeline of what actually happened, and this is a story from Patrick Klepek from Vice News. So EVO first tweeted out, "We're aware of the accusations that have been made against Joey Cuella," and he's the CEO, or former CEO. "The behavior in these accusations run directly counter to EVO's mission of building a safe, welcoming environment for all of our players and attendees. We take this responsibility seriously. Accordingly, Joey has been placed on administrative leave pending a third-party investigation." And there was an update that Capcom, NetherRealm, and Main 6 have all announced they will no longer participate in EVO, and Cuella has responded to the accusations. He said, "I'm sorry, I never meant to hurt anyone. I was young and reckless and did things I'm not proud of. I have been growing and maturing over the last 20 years, but that doesn't excuse anything. All I have been trying to do is become a better person. Once again, I'm truly sorry." And update 2 is where EVO announced that they won't, Cuella won't be working with them anymore. So EVO writes, "Over the past 24 hours, in response to serious allegations recently made public on Twitter, we have made the first of a series of important decisions regarding the future of our company. Effective immediately, Joey Cuella will no longer be involved with EVO in any capacity. We are currently working towards his complete separation from the company and have relieved him of all of his responsibilities. Going forward, Tony Cannon will act as CEO. In this position, he will take a leadership role in prioritizing greater accountability across EVO, both internally and at our events. Progress doesn't happen overnight or without the bravery of those who speak up against misconduct and injustice. We are shocked and saddened by these events, but we are listening and committed to making every change that will be necessary in making EVO a better model for the stronger, safer culture we all seek. As a result, we will be cancelling EVO Online and will work to issue refunds for all players who chose to purchase a badge. We will donate the equivalent of the proceeds as promised to Project Hope." So basically what happened was this latest allegation or accusation comes on the heels of many other accusations of varying degrees of misconduct that have been sweeping through the games industry in recent weeks. And you can watch my episode from last week to look at all of the other allegations, such as Chris Avallone and Angry Joe and people from Ubisoft. But it seems like everybody is coming out now. And the various allegations against Cuella were made overnight by Twitter user Pyron Ikari. Pyron Ikari did not respond to an additional request for comment through a Twitter DM as of this writing. So basically, there's a lot of more information about, and you can read that yourself, but effectively what was happening was that Joey Cuella used his position as the CEO of the fighting game industry, and he would force these underage boys to do things that they shouldn't really be doing, like for example jump in their pool in their underwear, and yeah, there's a lot of other more serious stuff there that we just don't need to go to, but you can read it for yourself. And I'll put a link in the description below for this. But this has always been a problem with the fighting game community, I honestly have to say. There's been many other stories like this that I've read about in the past. And this is just another one of them. And even as this story was breaking, we had other stories of other Smash players, part of the fighting game community, who obviously had their own problems of harassment. So just 2 other examples was Smash player Zero accused of harassment by Jisoo and sending sexual messages to Katie when she was 14 years old. And Jisoo writes that, "You were showing me explicit Craigslist ads of sex workers and hentai on the big screen and constantly harassing me at the Sky House when I was 15. And there's a whole lot of other information there that you can go read yourself, but that's one more. And then there was another one. Smash player Pape comes out about his sexual abuse by player Sinpai when he was 14 and she was 24, and there's a much longer post that you can go and read yourself about that. And honestly, you know, people need to come out and talk about these sort of things, and not just strictly to shame people, but to make people more aware that this stuff is really not okay, and people shouldn't really be doing it. And if you see it, or because it will bring more awareness to people who maybe at the time are not sure if they're being harassed or not. Sometimes it's a very gray area, and people don't know if they've crossed that line. And if people come out with these stories more, then it's possible for other people to be more actively aware at that point in time, and tell people to stop it on the spot, rather than having to live with the silent treatment for 3, 4, 5 years before they can finally come out with it, and having to live with that as a mental issue inside them, and thinking about whether they're okay or not. So this is definitely a positive thing that people are coming out to talk about it, and I want more people to come out with it, not to shame other people, though clearly people need to learn a lesson, but for people to grow from this, and we can all learn from this as a community issue, that we can't be treating people like this in this way. Basically, they're going to increase the price of the next generation games for NBA 2K, and it's going to be $70 or $69.99 for the PS5 and Xbox Series X versions, and it will be $59.99 for the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, PC, and Stadia versions. Now, there's a bit more information here, which I'll just go through. Now, if you buy the Member Edition, you'll get both the current gen and the next gen, no matter which edition you buy. So effectively, they're more or less the same thing. If you buy the PlayStation 4 version with the PlayStation 4 cover, you will get a free upgrade to NBA 2K for next generation. And it's got the Williamson cover on it, but I assume it'll probably be just the digital version anyway, so the cover doesn't really matter. And if you buy the Member PlayStation 5 version, you'll get the PlayStation 4 version free of charge, a downgrade effectively, so you can play on your old consoles. And the Member Edition will be $99.99. Now, the differences between the current gen and the next generation is, for the next generation, it says that it has unbeatable graphic fidelity, 2-second load screens, mostly due to the SSD, and it might even be faster on the PS5. New gameplay features, expanded game modes, and yeah, again, it's going to be $10 more. Everything else will more or less be the same. There'll be all of your team points and tokens, cards, and progress carry over from generations. So from PS4 to PS5, and the Xbox the same. And all your earned and purchased VC is shared, which is pretty good. That said, I wish there was less of the VC, the points and all of that sort of stuff. But I think the key point to take away there is that they're charging more for their next generation game, and it's going to be $10 more. Now, if 2K are already going to charge $10 more for NBA, you can probably bet that a few other publishers are going to be thinking about charging $10 more for next generation, mostly because they can. And with early adopters, usually they pay whatever they want to pay, whatever they can pay, because there's nothing else out really. I mean, you don't go and buy a console and then decide that $10 is too much, so you're not going to buy the game. You're just going to buy the game anyway. And next generation are always the time when they're thinking about increasing costs of games. Now we have another article, And this is from Games Industry Biz, where other publishers are considering raising game prices for PS5 and Xbox Series X. This article is from Christopher Dring, and he writes, it follows the news that NBA 2K21 will be priced at $69.99 on the next consoles, $10 more expensive than it is on current devices. Speaking with Games Industry Biz, IDG President and CEO Yoshio Osaki says that game pricing has remained flat since 2005, whereas TV and movie pricing has increased significantly. The last time that next-gen launch software pricing went up was in 2005 and 2006, when it went from $49 to $59 at the start of the Xbox 360 and PS3 generation. Now, I always thought PS2 was $60 anyways, but I'm not 100% sure. I know sometimes the SNES era, there were definitely some games that were $60. He goes on to write that even with the increase to $69.99 for next generation, that price increase from 2005 to 2020 next gen is only up 17%, far lower than the other comparisons. While the cost of development and publishing have gone up and pricing in other entertainment verticals has gone up substantially, next-gen software pricing has not reflected these increases. $59 to $69 does not even cover these other cost increases completely, but does move it more in the proper direction. Not every game should garner the $69.99 price point on next-gen, but flagship AAA such as NBA 2K merit this pricing more than others. Now, speaking from a purely consumer perspective, nobody thinks about a price increase as, well, this is 17%. Normally people think of it as, well, is it like $5 more or $10 more? I can afford that $5, so I'll pay that $5. I don't think people are going to walk into a shop and go, well, this is 17% more, so I'm not paying that. That's much too much. I only believe in 5% or 10% profit, so I only accept price increases of, $3.45, etc., etc. I think that they shouldn't really be increasing the price. If it's $60, there'll be the demand for $60, and for $70, there'll be the demand for $70. So it will probably be less than the amount of people who want to buy at $60. With all that said, they're definitely taking advantage of the situation where people can't really do anything else but buy the game because there's going to be a lack of choice of games. So what are people going to do? They're not really going to go and buy, because they just bought the PS5 or the Xbox Series X. They want to go and buy 3 or 4 games, and it's not like they're going to just go home with one game. If they want 3 or 4 games, they're going to buy 3 or 4 games. So they're just going to hand over the $10 begrudgingly. But it seems like the publishers are going to take advantage of this situation where there's not a whole lot of games on the market, and so the supply isn't really there, but the demand is, and they're going to move that price up. And honestly, I think they really should be thinking about putting this on the back end of this price increase on the back end of games. So, maybe charging people for an expansion or some DLC at the end, rather than front loading this extra $10 on the front. I think they make a lot of money that way anyway, to cover for the fact that these games, because when he says that games are $50 to $60 for the Xbox generation, back then there wasn't as much DLC, and now with the PS4 almost every game has DLC. Almost every game there's a season pass, and you're literally paying double anyway. So the season pass is like $30, so really effectively people are paying $90 for the game. So what they're trying to do is trying to nickel and dime everybody again. Increase $10 here, the season pass is going to be $40, now you're paying $110 for your game. So there's not a whole lot consumers can really do about this. I guess The only thing is really people should consider more deals when they can. So if your local department store or online store has a deal, then take advantage of the deal and continue to pay like 20% off for launch games if you can, which will hopefully bring that down to like say maybe $50 or $55, and that would be a more reasonable price to pay rather than paying the full upfront $70 for the game. Media Molecule tweeted out that they are going to bring VR support to Dreams on the PlayStation 4, and their tweet is, "Step into the Dreamverse, literally, VR support comes to Dreams PS4 on July 22nd, 2020. Create your own VR games, share them with other dreamers, and experience a whole new side of Dreams." So that sounds pretty amazing that finally there's going to be an easy way for people to create VR games. And I think in terms of VR players, I hope that they can find the content easily enough, because that was actually one of the problems of some of the other Media Molecule games, that they've kind of expected everybody to be creators, and then the game, people were very confused, because I think like most people aren't really creators, they're more consumers, right? So when they actually went to play Little Big Planet and they found that it was hard to find content, they dropped off the game very quickly, and they didn't come back for Little Big Planet 2 or 3. And I think really like what Dreams really needs to do is be more like what it is on the PC platform with modding, right? So with modding, most people are playing the actual game, but there are a few select modders that go and create stuff for everyone. And I think that's the platform that Media Molecule should be taking with all of their games, because not everyone is a creator, even though I know they want everybody to go out and create stuff like they're creating YouTube platform. I think in terms of being creative, not everyone has it. So most people who buy a game system are consumers in general. But I do wish Media Molecule all the best, because they really need it. They're a very talented studio. One of my favorite games is Tearaway, which actually I didn't really like to begin with, but I really enjoyed as I got into it. But it seems like their games really need more recognition than they currently get. Laura Bailey, voice actress from The Last of Us Part 2, has been receiving death threats because of her role in the game. And I'll just read the tweet. It says, "Man, I try to only post positive stuff on here, but sometimes this just gets a little overwhelming. I blacked out some of the words because, spoilers. Side note, thank you to all the people sending me positive messages to balance it out. It means more than I can say." And she screenshotted a few of the things that people have been writing to her. And it's just incredible that people are actually attacking the voice over actresses now. And I don't even know. I think that really crosses the line. I don't even understand why people would want to criticize her in any way. She is just the voice actress. She didn't create the game. And even if you did create a game, that doesn't mean that you should be attacking the people. You should be talking about the game and analyzing and criticizing the game itself, not the people who made it. It's basically a weak cop-out, because you don't really want to talk about the game. You want to attack these people. So let's talk about this video cards article, and it says that AMD Cezanne to feature Vega Graphics, Van Gogh to get Navi. Now, it says that AMD Cezanne is expected to launch under Ryzen 5000G, H, and U series next year. This is a successor to Renoir, which took the mobile market by surprise. And Renoir basically came out in the last couple of months, and it's done really well. And right now, it's probably the leading mobile laptop processor out on the market. So that would probably be the one to get, the Ryzen 4000 series on laptop. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that the 4800U is doing 1.8 teraflops for graphics performance. So it's really crazy how good the Renoir chips are. You could probably get like 1080p 30 frames a second in many games with that Renoir chip. Now, the article says that things are about to change with Rembrandt's arrival. This is the successor to Cezanne, but not only featuring newer Zen 3 cores, but also RDNA based integrated graphics, combining the best of both CPU and GPU worlds. Now, I'll just skip this for the time being, but Rembrandt, for them to say that Rembrandt is going to get RDNA integrated graphics, we're really looking at Ryzen 6000G, and that would be 2022 for when we get the RDNA based integrated graphics. And that would probably mean that we're probably around the 3 to 4 teraflop mark for Rembrandt, and that means that we're probably going to get 1080p 60 frames per second graphics. And I believe that's really the holy grail of mobile laptop computing and also cheap desktop computers, because now you don't have to buy a GPU. And 1080p is really the industry standard for, I guess, general use computing, because most screens on the market are 1080p, and there are still going to be tons and tons of 1080p screens by 2022. I don't believe by 2022 everybody will be working with a 4K monitor. Many people at work will probably be on 1080p screens. There'll be just tons of 1080p screens, and this will probably have a lot to do with I think this will be wildly popular when we get 1080 60 frames a second, and it looks like it will probably be Ryzen 6000G with Rembrandt with the RDNA graphics here. Now, it also says up a little bit ahead that it was Van Gogh that may have RDNA based graphics, but Van Gogh is the entry level mobile market, so that's probably not going to be very powerful anyway next year in 2021. So I think that's not really going to be that effective. What will really be effective is when we get RDNA graphics for Rembrandt, which will be 2022 for the mainstream mobile and entry-level desktop, and that really is when it's going to be really exciting. I actually bought a Ryzen 2000G, and at the time I was really excited that I wouldn't have to put a GPU into the desktop. I could play sort of indie games at the time, and you know, it was fine for things 3D games like Dirt Rally in 2018, to play Dirt Rally at 720p. But as soon as you move over to 900p and 1080p, things started to not be as smooth, and at 1080p it would kind of crawl. So it wasn't ready for 1080p gaming. But you know, a couple of years later with Renoir, we're getting very close to 1080p 30 frames per second, and in another 2 years we may get 1080 60. So really 2022 is when we're going to get like PS4 level style games at 1080 60. Now, they also have some information on Vermeer here. It is still not it is still not quite clear what will happen after Vermeer, the next generation Ryzen 4000 mainstream desktop series. We have already had a leak mentioning Warhol and Raphael, but it was not official or reported by other reputable sources to really take it seriously. Next year AMD will be shifting to the newer socket, so Warhol could be an interim series while we make the transition. Warhol is also rumored to be Zen 3 still, but probably a refreshed design known as Zen 3 Plus. Meanwhile, its successor is currently expected to be Raphael. Would bring Zen 4 cores to the market. This is a true upgrade for Ryzen family, as it should feature 5nm core design and support for DDR5 memory. Okay, it's really interesting that it will be Zen 4 that brings DDR5 memory and not Zen 3 Plus. And for those looking to hopefully get Vermeer this year, and wondering whether they would get Vermeer or get Zen 4. At one stage it looked like there wasn't going to be a Zen 3 Plus, so that would be the Ryzen 5000. But now it's looking like there'll be an interim step between Zen 3 and Zen 4, which means that that's really good news for people who are on Vermeer, because if it was just Zen 3 to Zen 4, it might be a big jump in performance. So then they would lose out a lot by going with Vermeer, and then 1 year later you'd get Zen 4 and it'd be much better and you'd have to think about upgrading it again. But for people who want Vermeer, having that stepping stone of Warhol, a Zen 3 Plus chip in between, that's great for Vermeer, people who want to buy Ryzen 4000. And that's a clear green light to go ahead and go and buy Ryzen 4000. Hopefully this year. It says in the unofficial AMD CPU roadmap that 2020 is when we're going to get Vermeer, and if it's not going to be 2020, it'll be very early 2021. And by that time the Ampere cards will be out, and who knows, maybe AMD Navi will also be out, but that's kind of looking like it's probably going to be 2021. Right, so that's it for this week. I hope you enjoyed the show. Now, just to plug a few things, I've done a series of videos on the Nintendo Switch, so be sure to check out part 1 and part 2, where I go over the problems of the Switch and then actually what the perfect Switch 2 would actually be. And also I just finished off Yakuza, so I did a couple of videos on Yakuza, so check that out on the site. And next week we have a video on the PC versus PS5 and how the PS5 has kind of exploded the PC a little bit. So be sure to check that video out. Now we're going to change up the order of how we post the videos out. I noticed that I had a lot of content in my JimRPG show videos, and so I think it makes a lot of sense to maybe try a different format for now. So we're going to break up posting the video out into little segments. So we're going to post those out, and then at the end of the week we're going to post the full show so that you can watch it as a podcast if you wanted to do it that way. Now we're going to try that for a little bit. We don't know how it's going to go, but we see a lot of other sites just posting stories, and so maybe that will help out the channel. So if you like this video, please be sure to click like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next week. Thanks.